Have you ever seen this flag before?
Do you know which country belongs to?
In our wall,
In this continent,
at the very tip of it,
you will find a land which is called the Rainbow Nation.
South Africa.
If you ever choose to go to South Africa,
You will find places like these ones, or cities such as Johannesburg or Cape Town.
this wonderful country even held the Football World Cup.
Even if you are lucky, maybe you will run into Charlize Theron or Nelson Mandela.
South Africa also has many languages, as many as 11.
Really? Why is that?
That's a very long story. The thing is that South Africa was first a Dutch colony, and then a British colony. But at the end, South Africa's independence was officially recognized by Britain. So as you can see, we have already here the mix of two languages, Dutch and English. If you add later the languages already existing in the country, you will understand the current situation of South African languages.
How great! So you mean that South Africa is a multilingual country?
Yes, it is, and that factor enriches the culture of the country. However, you have to know that from the very beginning, it has existed a racial problem, and as a consequence, the language has been affected.
In which sense are racial problems and languages related?
Well, as you may know, Dutch and English have been always spoken by white people who colonized the country, and blacks used to speak their own aboriginal languages. The coexistence between both races, living in the same country, means that all their languages were mixed. Even though English has been superior because whites were the ones dominating the country.
How is the English in South Africa spoken? It must be very different from England, as English coexists with 11 languages more.
In South Africa, there are so many accents, and each of them has their own features. For example, those ones who have Afrikaans as a first language have different features from those who speak only English. The phonetic features are different.
Could you tell me the main characteristics of the South African English?
There are many differences, and it is very hard to name them all, but the main ones would be the following. They tend to shorten all the vowels, avoiding distinction between long and short ones. I mean bath.
And palm would be pronounced with a short vowel. So instead of palm, it would be palm. Or the vowels in words such as dress and trap would be dress and trep.
That system of vowels seems to be easier than ours. So you mean that short and long vowels contrast is lost, don't you? So for example, there would be no difference pronouncing fleece and kit?
Exactly, that's the point. As well as in foot and goose, they have the same vowel. But not only that. So instead of family, it is family. The most important thing about this is that the very useful SVA semivowel becomes just an a full vowel.
So instead of saying mother, I would say mother, if I were South African. How weird, is it right?
Yes, but also you would say right instead of right, with a very pronounced final T.
Oh, I see. So some consonants are also different.
Yes, the final T is very well pronounced, and other consonants change, as for example, the initial plosives.
What?
Yes, the consonants B, D, G, and P, T, K are a bit exaggerated at the beginning of a word, like, let me think, poker and T. Also, they pronounce TH as an F, so they say something, and they got a tap R as in Paris.
Right. Something else?
Of course, we are not done yet.
Don't be impatient. Let me tell you some grammar and vocabulary features.
For example, what do you understand by I can be able to go to the braai?
That you are going to the braai? What is braai?
They say braai instead of barbecue, and they use can be able to as a modal verb, but there are more characteristics. They omit some articles, so they say he was good man instead of he was a good man. Also, South Africans sometimes omit the S in the third person. And there is no plural even if we are talking about more than one thing. And the simple past tenses are not always marked.
Hold on. So if you forget to use the S for the third person, it wouldn't be a grammatical mistake, and no plural is used, and the past either. How weird. So a sentence like, she go to the bride with his friend, and maybe there are more than one friend, and maybe that happened yesterday.
Yes, you got it. And this is because languages from South Africa are very simple. Most of them don't have concordance in number and gender. The last thing I would like to mention is that the comparative sentences are different. They would say he was short than all other men instead of he was shorter than other men.
So they omit more and the ER termination in order to compare.
Yes, and they are always saying ne. It is the question tag. I mean, you are coming to the bride party, ne? Instead of, aren't you? To conclude, let me tell you some funny differences in their vocabulary. For example, if I say, I'm not going to the bride party because I don't have Tom and because I prefer to go to my gogo's home to graze a leg of chicken sarmy.
What?
I have just said, I'm not going to the barbecue party because I don't have money and because I prefer to go to my grandmother's house to eat a delicious chicken sandwich.
I see, interesting words. But I don't really understand anything. I guess the only word that I know from South Africa is vuvuzela.
Yes, that is one of the international words that this country has. I hope you have learned something.
Yes, I do. With vowels, they hardly make distinction between short and long vowels, and their schwa disappears. With consonants, they have tapped R as in party. Their TH becomes an F, and their plosives are more exaggerated pronounced. With grammar, the S in the third person sometimes disappear, and their question tag is just an E. Also, their comparative sentences are different because they omit the AR and more. With words, they say bride instead of barbecue, grace instead of eat, gogo instead of grandmother, Tom instead of money, sarmy instead of sandwich.
Great, you have made a fantastic summary. And that's all, folks.